Look, there is nothing more important for a medical student than to build their medical school foundation. So in this video, I wanted you to understand exactly how somebody can go from having zero foundation in medical school to having a solid and strong medical foundation in order for, in order to go into exams like the USMLE Step 1 or PLAB or whatever the exam it is. All these exams depend heavily on having a strong exam or strong medical foundation. But before we get into the video, I want you to understand exactly, the whole idea about, building foundation in medical school and, the whole idea about studying in general, okay? So what is studying medicine all about? Okay, and this is a very important question. When you think about medicine is basically a language, right? It's simply a language. It's like hieroglyphs or, a very intricate, complicated, and complex set of rules and words, right? So in order for you to be able to understand the language, you have to decode the language. You have to make it as easily understandable as possible. If you fail to do that, that's why a lot of students basically memorize, okay? They go through memorization because it's very easy versus decoding the language of medicine into easily understandable language. So memorizing stuff is much easier than just decoding, which is the correct way of, going through medicine, is decoding the medical language into easily understandable language. Now, let me give you guys an example. So you probably know what an apple is, right? You know exactly what an apple is. It's very, very difficult for your brain to erase that memory of an apple, right? Because you know how it smells like, how it looks like, how it tastes like, and what is the difference between it and other fruits. You know exactly what an apple is. And in order for you to have good foundation and to go about studying the correct way, you have to have that mentality. You have to have that mindset of approaching medicine and turning it from very complicated subject and very complicated language into very, very easy language for your brain to grasp on, right? And this is basically the difference between good medical students and good doctors. They really understand stuff. They really very easily understand the language of medicine, okay? And because they decoded the language correctly, so they understand exactly what it is. Now, let me give you guys an example. You guys know what an ECG is, right? You probably have traumatizing event since medical school, when you first took the ECG and how weird that was, right? And how complicated it was, right? But let me tell you, good medical students really understand what an ECG is, and it's very simple, okay? Just you have to turn the language of ECG, the hard language of ECG, into very easily understandable language, okay? So the difference between a medical student and a doctor with a good foundation and a doctor without a good foundation is basically the ability to decode medical language correctly, okay? And this is what I'm going to tell you in this video. So the question here, how do I decode medical language into easily understandable language? Well, there are some pillars here that I've put together which are very crucial for you to be able to decode medical language the proper way, okay? The first pillar is everything, and I mean literally everything has to mean perfect sense, okay? If you go about reading something and it's not really, you're not convinced what is going on, you probably are gonna forget it, and your brain is just gonna erase it from your memory because it does not make sense. That's garbage, okay? That's the medical language. You just memorized the medical language. You did not decode it into easier language for your brain to understand. If everything made perfect sense, that is basically decoding. That's basically turning the intricate language of medicine into an easily understandable language, okay? So that's the first pillar. The second pillar is, why am I learning this? How in hell this is gonna help me treat a patient or, diagnose an illness or, cure a specific disease in a patient or even teach somebody something? How am I gonna use this? This is the second pillar and it's super important and it makes a big, big difference. So whenever you go through ECG, right, when you understand that you literally are going to be there in the emergency department and you're going to be asked to interpret that ECG, if you don't understand like the basics of ECG, you really aren't going to be able to interpret ECG, right? And it's going to be painful for you to do your job as a doctor. So it's super crucial, guys, to have a strong foundation, right? So that's the second pillar. So add this to the first pillar, okay? Add the second pillar to the first pillar, so everything has to make sense. When everything has to make sense, you will have your answer. You will have, oh, why am I learning this? This because I'm going to interpret ECG. So basically the purpose of my studying is to interpret ECG. So I have to understand ECG. I have to understand what is electricity. Like I have to go back to physics. Like what is electricity? Which is simply charged molecules, right? And in the heart, the charged molecules are sodium, potassium, and stuff like that. So basically the electricity in the heart is basically sodium, potassium, and calcium, all that stuff, right? And the movement of these current through the heart is basically moving of sodium, potassium through the heart, okay? Because and of course you guys know that the heart has gap junctions, so the current can move easily through the cells. So basically that's the electricity in the heart. Now the third pillar, which is very, very important, medicine is both interdisciplinary and medicine is layers, okay? Let me explain. So for example, you have a ECG, right? In order to understand ECG, you will have to understand a lot about physics, right? And it's very easy. Like it's not even the physics that, you know, math and equations, stuff like that. To understand, simply to be able to decode, you know, the complicated stuff into easily understandable language. For example, this is a good example. The definition of electricity. That's the physics part of the ECG that you need to know. You don't need to know fancy equations, right? You just need to know like what is electricity, how is electricity measured. For example, in order to measure a current, okay, you have to have a positive and a negative electrode, and you have to have a moving current between it, okay? So that's simple what you need to understand regarding physics. So this is the physics part. Also, you have anatomy. You have to understand some histology of the heart. You have to know that there are some gap junctions in the heart that helps the ions move from space to space, right? From a cytoplasm to a cytoplasm. So you have to have a little bit of understanding of histology in addition to the physics. And then also you have to have an understanding of chemistry, which is really understand that like the difference between sodium molecules and sodium ions. That's simple. So that's what I mean regarding medicine is interdisciplinary, and whenever you're studying histology or anatomy, it really doesn't make sense that you study each subject alone. Integrating subjects is what you do. That's medicine. Medicine is interdisciplinary. We've talked about that. Medicine is layers. Let me tell you exactly what that means. You know antibiotics, right? In order to learn antibiotics, you have to you first have to learn the names, right? So the first layer of antibiotics is learning their names, right? For example, let's take ceftriaxone. Ceftriaxone is a very famous drug. If I don't really know the name itself, like the name, like let's say I'm a new medical student, I haven't heard ceftriaxone anywhere, and I just saw ceftriaxone. It's a very difficult name. And if I just get right into the mechanism of action and the side effects and all that stuff, I probably forget most of the stuff, right? But first, I have to learn the name very well. Ceftriaxone, and I have to remember the intricacies of the word itself. So so there is a tri, so 3 something, or ax, 3 axes or something, ceftriaxone. I have to learn the name itself, and after I learn the name, it's very easy to stick anything to the name. So it's very easy to stick the mechanism of action to the name because I know the name, I know the drug, I literally know the drug because I know the name itself. So that's what I mean by layers. So the first layer is names, the second layer is mechanism of actions, this third layer is side effects. So I have to stick things in an arrangement. You might tell me that everything that's all that is nice, and I'm very convinced that, well, that's amazing. If I was in early medical school, that video would be helpful. But I'm in 5th year or 6th year. I'm even a doctor, and I really don't have the foundation that you're talking about, right? So how to build it from scratch? And my answer here is reverse decode, okay? So instead of going apple is, you know, that shape, go that shape is an apple. Let me explain. I know it's kind of messy here. Let me give you a question from USMLE Step 1 as an example of how to reverse decode in order to build your medical school foundation. So let's go to my laptop, guys. So guys, here is a question from USMLE Step 1. One of my students sent me yesterday. He had a problem like solving this question. Like, anyway, I'm gonna use this question to show you guys how can you reverse decode learning using question banks, okay, like the UWorld question banks right here. Okay, so let's read the question and identify how I approach a question, and then use this question in order to get information and learn stuff, okay? And how I decode the language of medicine in this question into easily understandable language, which is the whole idea I'm talking about here. Okay, let's read. A 62-year-old man comes to the office with the right arm clumsiness. Okay, I have no idea what that is. Okay, let's see. So right arm, here's a right arm clumsiness. Let's take a look. Here's the code. Okay, in order to decode the language of medicine, clumsiness, right? You have to know what clumsiness means, right? So I'm gonna search for the word clumsiness here. Okay, clumsiness. Okay, and I'm gonna try to decode the word clumsiness into the medical language, like to see what is clumsiness. The quality of being awkward or careless in one's movements. So this is a word that describes, like the word clumsy describes the movement of somebody as if it was awkward or careless. Okay, so it's really like careless movement, or lacks skill or finesse, or tactless, or so I could say like there is something wrong with his right arm movement. Okay, let me continue reading so that I can like understand exactly what they're talking about. Physical examination reveals motor weakness involving the right arm and leg. Here we go. So they explained to me that the meaning of right arm clumsiness is motor weakness in the right arm. Okay, so because it's weak, it's clumsy. Okay, it's lacking skills. For example, if I'm trying to hold this pen, if my hand is weak, it's gonna be clumsy to hold this hand. I'm not gonna be able to hold the hand, the pen correctly and actually write. You know, of course, I'm not gonna be able to write in a proper manner because it's clumsy, right? So what I've done here is that I took the language, the medical language, and break it down and understand really well what does it mean. Okay, using dictionaries, using my brain thinking about like right arm clumsiness. So it means weakness. Okay, so this is an example. Let's continue. So the patient's speech is slurred and there is drooping of the right lower face. Okay, so the patient's speech is slurred. So that's like directly. This is a medical language like thing. I want to know how does that look like in real life. Speech is slurred, so he's not be able to. He wanted to say something, but he cannot say it. Okay, and there is drooping of the right lower face. So basically, you have muscles in your face. Okay, and drooping of the right face means there is some weakness in the muscles of the lower face. So it's not able, you know, to. My muscles aren't able to hold my face together, my skin and subcutaneous tissue and other stuff together, so it's weak. It's weakening. Okay, it's weak, so it falls like that. All right, let's continue reading. All that I'm really decoding the language in front of me first. That's the first step, right? That's the first pillar right here. So on passive flexion of the right arm, okay, passive flexion. So there is a difference here. Passive flexion versus active flexion. Okay, all that I'm thinking about passive flexion. What do you mean by passive? Passive is like there is no activity. Like I'm gonna tell you because I know this language here. I have already decoded like what does that mean. So a passive flexion is basically somebody who is doing the action for you. Active flexion, I'm actively doing the flexion. But passive flexion, there is a test. You know, somebody is flexing my arm for me. It's not me. It's not my arm. It's like it's not me who is flexing my arm. It's like there is somebody who is flexing my arm. So obviously, in this case, the doctor is flexing the arm in order to see, like, it's a test. Okay, it's an upper motor neuron test. Anyway. So on passive flexion of the right arm, there is initial resistance, followed by a sudden release of tension as flexion is continued. This is continued, yeah. So initial resistance. So I'm trying to passively flex the right arm. All that I'm decoding, right? All that I'm trying to translate what is being said right here. So in passive flexion of the right arm, right, I'm trying to imagine very well to decode the language, then imagine the language in my brain, like passive flexion. Okay, passive flexion, this is passive flexion of the right arm. There is initial resistance, so there is a resistance from my arm, followed by sudden release of tension as flexion continues. So it's like that, right? Or maybe like that. I don't know yet. So, but because I know the language here, they're referring to the clasp knife movement, which happens because of an upper motor neuron lesion. So that's what they mean here. So basically, they're trying to passively flex the arm, and then initial resistance, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, let's continue. A lesion affecting which of the following brain structures is most likely responsible for this patient's condition? Okay, so now I decoded everything. I understand exactly what's going on, as if I'm like, as you know, an apple, right? I understand this question as I understand an apple. Everything is fine now. All right. Now I understand. That's what I mean by decoding the language. All right. You're trying to understand, really dig in. What exactly do you mean? Like drooping of the right lower face? What do you mean by that? Okay, drooping of the right lower face. So why does this patient has drooping of the right lower face and I don't? Because I have intact muscles. So I'm trying to really think about everything, right? I'm trying to decode, like understand stuff. I came here to understand. I didn't come here to memorize or to quickly go through the question or stuff like that. I came here to understand, okay? So without further ado, the answer here is just B, it's internal capsule stroke. If you guys want to know the answer, that's simply you have right arm clumsiness and you have right facial droop. So basically you have a left lesion here, which is in the internal capsule. You have a problem with the motor tract, which is obviously B. It's not A, E, or C because, like, I mean, the insula doesn't have anything to do with motor stuff. D is the basal ganglia. It's the putamen. A is caudate nucleus. E is the globus pallidus. All that will lead to chorea and movements and stuff like that. So it's not A, D, E, or C. It's B. So it's the internal capsule. Okay. Yeah, and basically that's it. That's what I mean by decoding the language. Okay, guys, let's get back into the video. So guys, simply, if you are in 5th year, you're a doctor or whatever, what you're going to do is basically solve questions and solve them in the manner I told you, which is literally trying to understand every single word in the question stem and then try to use the explanations to understand. And when you have everything put in place and you understand, like, most of the, like, everything about the question, and you break it down, like break that difficult, intricate, complex language to easily understandable language to yourself, you perfectly understand. Now your brain will remember it better and you will have no problem whatsoever in building that foundation, right? Because you're going to do a lot of these questions in random and timed. You're going to have, like, by time you will build that foundation easily. Okay, so this is basically, guys, my formula of building the foundation, which I used, and I have, like, literally that's what I did. Okay, I was 0 in early years of medical school. I really struggled. I hated medical school a lot, but now because I know the formula, and I'm telling you guys that that's really all you need to do, is basically to break down and to decode every single thing, you know, and to make everything make sense for you. And then you can use things like Anki in order to fortify some of the concepts. Like, of course, after you break it down and understand it and stuff like that, and using questions, you can add Anki flashcards in order to, like, fortify some of the concepts you learned. Okay, I'm very sorry about the long video, but I really had to do it. I try to like rewrite the script a lot of times in order in order for the video not to be that long. But that's it, guys. I hope you got a ton of value from it, and thank you so much, guys, for your support. My channel now is going to be over like close to 1,000 subscribers. I'm gonna do an amazing free giveaway. Okay, USMLE coaching one-on-one to some of the people that are watching me. So if you have a USMLE Step 1 coming, just contact me. But you know, I'm gonna do the video of the free giveaway like today or tomorrow, to thank you guys for your support. Thank you so much for watching, and find me on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, and that stuff. And yeah, much love.